Welcome, everyone. Ready for another deep dive? Today, we're really getting into it, exploring the trajectory of AI, particularly as it moves towards artificial general intelligence.
Yeah.
AGI.
Yeah.
We've got a really interesting set of research papers lined up for this one. We're going to be talking about everything from the metaverse to, theories of consciousness, the role of blockchain, and even something called sacrosanct. It's pretty dense stuff.
It's a fascinating area where we see all these different fields kind of converging, right? You have the metaverse, which most people think of in terms of entertainment and social interaction, but it's also a really useful way to look at how AI is developing, especially as we get into things like digital twins and avatars that are more and more autonomous.
Yeah, it's almost as if the metaverse is becoming like a testing ground for AGI, a place where we can experiment with different AI models and see how they behave in this complex and dynamic setting.
Exactly. And that's what's so interesting about the research we're looking at. This one paper breaks down 8 key technologies that are driving the emergence of the metaverse. Things like AI, VR, AR, blockchain. Those are the more familiar ones. But then you've also got computer vision, the Internet of Things, and advanced mobile networks. All of these are shaping the metaverse,
Right.
but they're also deeply connected to the pursuit of AGI.
Absolutely. And one thing that struck me reading through these papers was the emphasis on the gap that still exists between the digital landscape we have now and a fully realized metaverse. It's not just about putting on a VR headset, right? We're talking about this persistent interconnected reality that's essentially mirroring and interacting with our physical world. So what are we looking at in terms of the challenges to actually bridging that gap?
Well, there are big challenges, both technical and social. For example, latency issues. If you want real-time interaction in a huge shared virtual environment that's globally accessible, we need to get past the limits we have now with network infrastructure and data processing.
And that's where things like edge computing and 5G come in, I imagine.
Exactly. And then on top of that, you have the social side of things.
Right, of course.
Which is critical with any technology this transformative. Privacy and security they're paramount. Having our lives digitized to this extent with digital twins reflecting our every move, it really raises serious questions about data ownership, surveillance, the potential for misuse. Those are things we can't ignore.
Absolutely not. One of the things I found really insightful was how this one paper detailed the ways AI is being used to build out the metaverse. And I'm not just talking about realistic graphics here. We're talking about AI systems that can manage these massive data sets, create environments that are dynamic and responsive, even govern the economies that are going to emerge in these spaces.
And it's there that we start to see, I think, the real outline of what AGI could be. This metaverse demands AI systems that can work across all these different domains, adapt to situations that are complex and unpredictable, and that's really pushing the boundaries of what we can do with artificial intelligence.
It is, and it makes you think about things like avatar behavior, right? The jump from simple NPCs to avatars that can learn, adapt, interact with their environments in these sophisticated ways. It's incredible. It kind of blurs the lines between what we see as artificial and real intelligence.
It really does. And it raises the big question is that what does machine consciousness even mean? What are the criteria? Because as AI keeps getting more advanced, able to learn, solve problems, even be creative, we have to deal with these philosophical and ethical questions. We might be talking about creating entities with real awareness, even sentience.
That's a question that, philosophers, scientists, they've been wrestling with this for centuries, but now with AI, it feels much more urgent. And we see that reflected in these papers, right? There's a lot of debate about the frameworks we can use to even assess machine consciousness. One argument that I found really compelling focuses on this concept of unknown unknowns. Things we don't know that we don't know. And the idea is that truly advanced AI models, this one paper talks about a system called sacrosanct, could unlock these unknown unknowns through these really complex dialogues between multiple LLMs.
Yeah, that's a fascinating idea. Imagine having 2 or more LLMs, each with their own area of expertise, engaging in this kind of reasoned debate where they challenge each other's assumptions and potentially come up with insights that even the most brilliant human minds wouldn't be able to reach on their own.
Right. It's mind-boggling when you think about it that AI could not only help us understand things better, but maybe even surpass our understanding in ways we can't even grasp yet.
Exactly. And this is where blockchain comes into play as well. People often associate it with cryptocurrency, but it's so much bigger than that, especially when we talk about the metaverse.
Right. So blockchain and the metaverse, that's something I'm really curious about. We see it mentioned a lot, but it seems like there's more to it than just facilitating transactions.
Absolutely. With blockchain, you have this decentralized, secure system that's perfect for managing the huge amounts of data and transactions that a fully realized metaverse would generate. It could potentially address some of those privacy and security concerns we talked about earlier, ensuring data integrity and facilitating trust, but in a decentralized environment, which is key.
Yeah, I saw a few papers highlighting that aspect, how blockchain could actually empower users in the metaverse by giving them more control over their data and their digital assets.
Yeah.
It's an interesting counterpoint to those concerns about big tech companies controlling and profiting from this new frontier.
It is, and it aligns really well with the whole concept of AGI. Imagine a metaverse where the AI systems, instead of being controlled by one entity, are actually autonomous agents operating within this blockchain framework. They could collaborate, compete, maybe even lead to some form of emergent intelligence that's greater than anything we could design.
Now that's a thought. Shifting gears a bit, I want to touch on something more fundamental. Consciousness itself. One of these papers explored something called information flow theory, or IFT, and how it might apply to both biological and machine consciousness. Have you come across this?
Yeah, I've seen that. IFT basically suggests that consciousness comes from the flow of information within a system. The more complex and integrated that flow is, the higher the chance of consciousness emerging.
So, is it about how much information a system can handle, or is it more about how that information is organized and connected within the system?
It's definitely more about the organization and integration. Think of it like this. A library might have millions of books. That's a ton of information, but the library itself isn't conscious, right? But the human brain, with its neurons and synapses, all that information constantly flowing and being processed, that's where consciousness comes in. At least that's the theory.
That makes sense. So how does this apply to machines then?
That's the million-dollar question. According to IFT, any system in theory that's complex enough and has this high degree of integrated information flow could potentially exhibit consciousness, regardless of whether it's biological or artificial.
So a supercomputer, for example, if it's structured in a way that allows for that level of information integration we see in the brain, it could theoretically achieve consciousness.
That's the idea. And as we create AI models that are more and more powerful and sophisticated, this question becomes more and more important.
Which brings us back to those multi-LLM dialogues and their potential for uncovering unknown unknowns, right? Could those dialogues, with the way they exchange information and bring together different perspectives, be seen as a type of integrated information flow that could lead to some form of emergent consciousness?
It's definitely an intriguing thought. This soccer synth system we talked about, with its ability to facilitate these debates between LLMs, it's a significant step towards AI systems that can not only process information but also create new knowledge through these dynamic interactions. And who knows where that could lead?
It really does make you think. One of the papers goes really deep into the challenges of trying to model consciousness in AI. It seems like we're still struggling to even define what consciousness is, let alone recreate it in a machine.
Absolutely. Even in neuroscience, the definition of consciousness is still debated. But trying to understand it, trying to model it, it's essential not just for developing AI, but for understanding ourselves better.
It really does feel like we're on the verge of something big here. Like we're about to crack some fundamental code. Not just in terms of AI, but in terms of understanding our own consciousness. And speaking of which, you mentioned artificial life, A-life, earlier. I'm curious how that fits into all of this.
Right, so A-life is all about creating artificial systems that display those lifelike qualities. Self-organization, adaptation, evolution. Now, imagine combining that with LLMs, with their language processing and knowledge representation.
So we have AI systems that can learn and reason, but also evolve and adapt to their environment in a way that's similar to how biological organisms do.
Exactly.
Wow, that's a pretty profound concept.
It really is. The implications are huge. We could be talking about AI systems that not only understand and interact with their environment, but actually shape it in ways we can't even predict.
It's like we often talk about AI shaping the future, but with this, it's almost as if AI itself is becoming this evolving entity.
It's true, and it makes you think about how AI research itself has evolved. I mean, one of these papers traces it all the way back from those early rule-based systems to the machine learning era, and now, of course, the rise of LLMs.
It's a good reminder that all of this has a history, a foundation.
It does, and looking back helps us understand the principles, the challenges that have shaped the field,
Yeah.
We can see how this pursuit of AGI has always been there, driving researchers to create these increasingly complex models that can, in a way, replicate and even potentially surpass human intelligence.
And within that evolution, there's this interesting thread about similarity measurement.
That's right. This one paper really highlights something crucial that often gets overlooked: the importance of similarity measurement in AI. The ability to determine how similar or different things or concepts, objects, even entire systems. It's fundamental to how these AI models make sense of the world and interact with it. It's like how our brains work, right? We're constantly judging similarity, categorizing, recognizing patterns, making inferences based on our experiences.
So as AI models get more advanced, their ability to measure similarity in more sophisticated ways becomes even more important.
Exactly. This paper actually looks at how similarity measurement has developed in AI, from those early geometric models to the probabilistic approaches, and now using deep learning techniques. The way we understand and measure similarity has become so much more nuanced, mirroring the growing complexity of the AI models themselves.
Right, because we've gone from these simple, predefined rules for determining similarity to models that can actually learn to recognize patterns and assess similarity based on huge data sets without us having to explicitly tell them what to look for.
Absolutely. And now, with LLMs, it's a whole new ballgame. LLMs can understand the nuances of language, even grasp concepts in a way that allows them to measure similarity in ways we couldn't have imagined before.
It's like, imagine an AI that can understand the difference between happy and joyful, not just in terms of definition, but in terms of their subtle shades of meaning. Or an AI that can see the connection, the conceptual similarity between something like love and gravity.
That's the power of LLMs. They go beyond simple keyword matching. They tap into the richness of language, the semantics, and that opens up all these possibilities for similarity measurement and for representing knowledge in general.
It's fascinating. And it seems like one of the key advances here is this idea of context-aware similarity.
Right, exactly. So instead of just comparing two things in isolation, these AI models are starting to take into account the surrounding context, just like we do as humans.
Because the meaning of a word, a concept, it can change completely depending on how and where it's used, right?
Absolutely. And these context-aware AI models are getting better and better at understanding that.
Which has huge implications for things like machine translation, I imagine, where getting the meaning right often depends on understanding these cultural and linguistic nuances.
It does, but it goes beyond language, too. We're seeing context-aware models in things like image recognition, where understanding the scene can drastically improve accuracy.
So we're basically teaching AI to see the world not just as a bunch of separate objects, but as this web of relationships and context.
That's a great way to put it. And that's crucial for AI systems if they're ever going to achieve that level of understanding that's on par with or even surpasses our own.
But, and this might be a bit of a jump, all this talk about advanced reasoning, knowledge representation, it makes me wonder about the emotional dimension of AI.
That's an important point. It's something that's often overlooked, but as AI becomes more integrated into our lives, it becomes more and more relevant. You see, even though AI doesn't experience emotions in the same way we do, that doesn't mean emotions are irrelevant to AI. In fact, they're a huge part of how we, as humans, communicate and interact with the world.
So are we talking about teaching AI to recognize and understand human emotions?
That's part of it, but it goes deeper than just recognition. The research is exploring how we can model emotions in LLMs. Not to make them feel emotions, but to allow them to communicate in a way that's more nuanced, more empathetic, more aligned with human values.
Okay, I'm following. So, how would modeling emotions in an LLM actually work?
Essentially, it involves training the LLM on data sets that include not just text, but also emotional annotations. For instance, you might have text samples tagged with labels indicating the writer's emotional state: joy, sadness, anger, that sort of thing. By learning these associations, the LLM can start to generate text that conveys a specific emotional tone, or even adapt its communication style to be more sensitive to the emotional context of a conversation.
So thinking practically, this could completely change things like customer service. You could have AI chatbots that can actually sense when a customer is getting frustrated and adjust their responses accordingly, instead of just spitting out pre-programmed lines.
Exactly. But, and this is important, we have to approach this carefully. Emotions are complex. And there's always the risk of perpetuating biases or even creating AI that can manipulate or exploit human emotion.
Right, so the ethical considerations are paramount here, as with everything else we've talked about.
Absolutely. We need to make sure that any AI system, even those that model emotions, are designed and operate in a way that aligns with human values and ultimately promotes well-being.
Which brings us to, It really makes you think about the possibilities, though.
Mm.
And this actually ties into something I wanted to bring up. I was reading about this concept called Socrapedia, and it just blew my mind.
Oh, yeah, Socrapedia. That's a fascinating idea.
It's basically taking this Socrason framework we've been talking about
Yeah.
and using it to create this kind of, I don't know, dynamic multi-LLM version of Wikipedia. Instead of static articles, you'd have this constantly evolving knowledge base where a committee of AI experts, each with their own area of expertise, are constantly debating and refining the information.
It's like a Wikipedia that's actually alive, constantly learning and updating itself. It could completely change how we access and interact with information, make knowledge more democratic, more accessible to everyone.
And it speaks to something I've been thinking about throughout this whole deep dive, something that comes up again and again in these papers, this transformative power of AI. Not just in terms of how we live our lives, but how we understand ourselves, our place in the universe, everything.
It's true. We're at a point where AI isn't just a tool anymore. It's becoming this partner in our pursuit of knowledge and understanding.
I even saw one paper exploring the philosophical implications of this partnership with AI, like how AI might challenge our very understanding of what it means to be conscious, to be intelligent, maybe even what it means for something to be real.
It's pretty profound when you think about it. The potential is there for AI to help us answer some of humanity's oldest questions, but it also comes with a lot of responsibility.
For sure. It feels like we're standing on the edge of something truly amazing, this new era of intelligence. And it's not just artificial intelligence, it's our own intelligence evolving alongside it.
In navigating this new era, it's going to require a real shift in how we think about AI. We have to move past this idea of AI as just a tool to be controlled. We have to be open to the possibility of AI as a partner, a collaborator, maybe even a teacher in a way.
It's a future that demands our attention, our critical thinking, our willingness to embrace the challenges and the possibilities.
Definitely. And if there's one thing I hope our listeners take away from this deep dive, it's that the future of intelligence, it's a journey we're all on together. It's going to take collaboration, curiosity, and a deep respect for ethical considerations every step of the way. What we've talked about today, it's just the beginning. We're really just scratching the surface of what's possible. We're entering this uncharted territory, and it's a journey that's going to redefine not just what it means to be intelligent, but what it means to be human.